Y'all know the song, If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right. Of course you do. Luther Ingram sang it in 1972, #1 on the R&B chart, #3 on the Billboard Hot 100. Rod Stewart covered it. Barbara Mandrell took it to #1 on the country chart. Millie Jackson recorded it and earned 2 Grammy nominations. Isaac Hayes recorded it. 1 song, 5 major versions, decades of revenue. Now let me ask you, do you know who wrote that song, not Luther Ingram? He did not write it. Not Rod Stewart, not Barbara Mandrell, not Millie Jackson, not Isaac Hayes. None of them wrote it. A man named Homer Banks wrote that song, and I already know you have never heard that name before. But wait, it gets worse. Y'all know the song Who's Making Love, Johnny Taylor, 1968, #1 R&B, #5 on the Billboard Hot 100, the biggest selling single in the history of Stax Records. Do you know who wrote it? Homer Banks. Y'all know If You're Ready, Come Go With Me, the Staple Singers, 1973, #1 R&B, #9 on the Hot 100. Who wrote it? Homer Banks. Y'all know I Can't Stand Up for Falling Down. Elvis Costello took it to #4 in the UK. In 1980, who wrote the original Homer Banks? And y'all definitely know Gimme Some Lovin' by the Spencer Davis Group with Steve Winwood, #7 on the Hot 100. One of the most famous rock records of the 1960s, used in the Blues Brothers, used in dozens of Hollywood films. Do you know where that bass riff came from? From a song called A Lot of Love, written and recorded by Homer Banks, 1966. So let me get this straight. This one man wrote songs that were recorded by Luther Ingram, Johnny Taylor, the Staple Singers, Rod Stewart, Barbara Mandrell, Isaac Hayes, Elvis Costello, Sam and Dave Tom Jones. Simply read, and his melody ended up in one of the biggest rock hits of all time, and you have never heard his name, man. Homer Banks died of cancer on April 3rd, 2003, in Memphis, Tennessee, the city he helped build the sound of. He was 61 years old, and the world did not notice. Nobody talks about this. This is Homer Banks. They call him the invisible architect of Memphis soul. Y'all, let's get into the story right now. Now, Memphis, Tennessee, August 2nd, 1941. Y'all, Memphis, do you understand what that city means to the history of American music? Beale Street, Sun Records, Stax Records, the birthplace of rock and roll, the capital of the blues, the headquarters of Southern soul. But in 1941, Memphis is a Jim Crow city, segregated schools, segregated restaurants, segregated water fountains. The same doors that will eventually open for black music are bolted shut for black people. Homer Banks is born into that Memphis, born with a twin brother, James Banks, who will also end up in the music business. Both of them, twins, same DNA, same gift. James will go on to co-write Woman to Woman for Shirley Brown, the last major hit Stax Records ever had before the whole empire collapsed. 2 brothers, same womb, same city. Both will build the house of Stax. Both will be forgotten when the house becomes a museum. But we'll get to that. Homer Banks attends Booker T. Washington High School, the segregated school that will produce half the personnel of Stax Records, the assembly line of Memphis soul talent. And at 16 years old, 1957, Homer Banks forms a gospel group called the Soul Consolidators. He does not just sing, he writes the songs, original material. At 16, they tour the South, church to church, revival to revival. The boy is learning what music does to people before the industry ever gets its hands on him. After high school, he is drafted into the United States Army, stationed in West Germany, 1962 to 1964. While overseas, he wins an amateur contest and tours military bases performing. The music follows him across the Atlantic, and when his service ends, he comes home, back to Memphis, 1964, and the city has changed. Stax Records has opened a studio at 926 East McLemore Avenue. Soul music is exploding. Otis Redding is recording there. Booker T and the MGs are laying down grooves. The whole world is about to hear what Memphis sounds like. And Homer Banks walks back into the middle of it. But what happens next is not what you think. But see, Homer Banks goes to Stax Records with a dream. He wants to be a singer. He has the voice. He has the stage presence. He's been performing since he was 16. He has toured the South with a gospel group. He has won contests on military bases in Germany. He walks into Stax and asks for a recording contract. And Jim Stewart, co-founder of Stax Records, the man who built the entire operation, says no, not interested. We do not need another singer. Wow. Now, Jim Stewart's sister Estelle Axton, co-founder of Stax, the other half of the operation, she sees something in Homer Banks. But she does not give him a recording contract either. She gives him a job at the Satellite Record Shop, the record store attached to the Stax studio. Y'all, I need you to picture this. Homer Banks. A man who writes songs, who sings, who has been performing since he was a teenager, is standing behind a cash register selling records made by other people while the recording studio is on the other side of the wall. He can hear the sessions. He can hear Otis Redding warming up. He can hear the MGs running through takes. He can hear hits being made 10 feet from where he is standing. And he is selling records, not making them. Man. But here is what Homer Banks does with that situation. He does not quit. He does not leave. He studies. Every record that comes through that shop, he listens. He learns. He watches what sells and what does not. He figures out what makes a hit. And eventually, Stax gives him a songwriting contract, not a recording deal, a songwriting contract. He will write the songs. Other people will sing them. And in 1968, he forms a songwriting trio with Betty Crutcher and Raymond Jackson. They call themselves We Three. And their first song together is called Who's Making Love. They give it to Johnny Taylor, number 1 on the R&B chart, number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100, the biggest selling single in the history of Stax Records at that point in time. 5 on the Hot 100. And Homer Banks, the man who was told he was not good enough to sing at Stax, just wrote the biggest hit the label has ever had, from behind the wall, from behind the desk, from behind the name of another man. And that is just the beginning. He co-writes If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right with Carl Hampton and Raymond Jackson. Luther Ingram records it in 1972, number 1 R&B, number 3 on the Hot 100. He co-writes If You're Ready, Come Go With Me with Hampton and Jackson. The Staple Singers recorded in 1973, number 1 R&B. Number 9 on the Hot 100, he co-writes I Can't Stand Up for Falling Down with Alan Jones. Sam and Dave record the original. Elvis Costello covers it in 1980, number 4 in the UK. Hit after hit after hit. Johnny Taylor, Luther Ingram, the Staple Singers, Sam and Dave, Isaac Hayes, Rod Stewart, Barbara Mandrell, Tom Jones, Simply Red, Elvis Costello. All of these artists recorded Homer Banks songs, and every single time, the world remembers the name of the person singing. The world does not remember the name of the person writing. And that's the shady part of this business, right? But we'll get back to that. And here's the thing. While Homer Banks is writing hits for Stax, something else is happening. 1966, before Who's Making Love, before If Loving You Is Wrong, before any of the big songwriter credits, Homer Banks records a song called A Lot of Love with his co-writer Willa Dean Parker, released on the Minute label. A solid soul record with a distinctive bass riff. It does not chart big in America. But that bass riff, that specific unmistakable bass riff, shows up the same year in a song called Gimme Some Lovin' by the Spencer Davis Group, featuring a young man named Steve Winwood, 18 years old, from Birmingham, England. Gimme Some Lovin' goes to number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. It becomes one of the defining records of the British invasion. It appears in The Blues Brothers in 1980. It appears in dozens of films after that. It becomes one of the most licensed rock records in history. Steve Winwood builds an entire career off the momentum of that song. Solo career. Higher Love, multiple Grammys, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the bass riff, the one that everybody knows, the one that drives the entire record. Listen to A Lot of Love by Homer Banks. Then listen to Gimme Some Lovin' and tell me those are not the same riff. Shaking my head, Homer Banks received nothing. No songwriter credit, no royalty share, no acknowledgement. And here's the part that will make you angry. In 2016, 13 years after Homer Banks died, his estate and the estate of Willa Dean Parker filed a copyright infringement lawsuit against Steve Winwood and Muff Winwood. The case went to a United States appeals court, and in 2019 the court dismissed the case, not because the melody was different, not because the bass riff was original, because the plaintiffs did not file the correct paperwork. They did not submit a copy of the sheet music to the Copyright Office. A technicality. The melody is the same. Everybody hears it, and the court said, sorry, your paperwork was not in order. Wow, that's crazy. Meanwhile, back at Stax, Homer Banks is writing hit after hit, but the publishing, y'all, the publishing. His songs are published through the Stax system, and here is what happened to Stax. Jim Stewart, the same man who told Homer Banks he was not good enough to be a singer, signed a distribution deal with Atlantic Records back in 1961. And he did not read the contract carefully. When the deal ended in 1968, Atlantic Records kept every master recording Stax had made from 1960 to 1967. Every single one. The post-1968 catalog, including Who's Making Love and If Loving You Is Wrong and If You're Ready, stayed with Stax. But Stax was heading toward a cliff, and Homer Banks's songs were in the car. But we'll get to that. Right? December 1975. Stax Records files for bankruptcy. Federal marshals walk into 926 East Macklemore Avenue and seize everything. The building, the equipment, the master tapes, the studio where Homer Banks once stood behind a cash register selling records, the studio where he then wrote the biggest hits the label ever had shut down. Locked up, sold off. The master tapes are purchased by Fantasy Records in 1977. Later, Concord Music Group acquires Fantasy, and Homer Banks, one of the most important songwriters in the history of Stax Records, is left with nothing. No label, no infrastructure, no home base, no machine behind him. The house he helped build is gone, and nobody offers him a room in the new one. Man, he moves to California for a while, tries to rebuild, tries to find new opportunities on the West Coast, and then in the early 1980s he comes back to Memphis. He teams up with Chuck Brooks and co-founds a small independent label called Soundtown Records. And he writes and produces a song called Taxi for Jay Blackfoot, a former member of the Soul Children, another Stax group. Taxi goes to number 4 on the R&B chart in 1983. Number 4. Man. Homer Banks still has the magic. 20 years after he started writing hits, the gift is still there. The ear is still there. The ability to craft a song that millions of people connect with, still there. But Soundtown is a small label, independent, no major distribution, no promotional machine. One hit does not rebuild an empire. And the 1990s arrive. R&B shifts, new jack swing, hip-hop soul. The market moves on from Southern soul songwriting. Homer Banks continues to write, continues to produce, but at a smaller scale. In Memphis, in the same city where he once wrote #1 records, in quiet. And where was everybody? Where were the artists whose careers he built with his songs? Where were the labels that made millions off his compositions? Nobody called, nobody checked in. And a man who wrote the soundtrack to an entire era of American music spent his final years working without the world, knowing he was still in the room. Look, April 3rd, 2003, Memphis, Tennessee, Homer Banks dies of cancer. He is 61 years old. He dies in the same city that he helped give a voice. The same Memphis where Beale Street is still packed every weekend with tourists listening to blues and soul. The same Memphis where the Stax Museum of American Soul Music now stands on the ground where 926 East Macklemore Avenue used to be the building where Homer Banks once sold records behind a counter and then wrote hits behind a wall. The museum is open. His songs are in the exhibits, his name is in the liner notes, and Homer Banks is dying. Now here is what happens when Homer Banks passes. CNN does not run a story. MTV does not broadcast a tribute. BET does not acknowledge the passing of a man who co-wrote at least 3 #1 R&B records. Billboard does not publish a retrospective. The Grammy Awards do not mention his name. The Guardian, a British newspaper, writes a short obituary. They call him an unsung hero. Y'all think about that phrase. Unsung. A man who wrote songs that the entire world has been singing for 40 years, and the best word they can find for him is unsung. Even in the tribute, he is invisible. A few soul music websites publish obituaries, written by people who actually understand the architecture of Memphis soul, read by a few hundred people. That is it. And at the exact moment Homer Banks dies, Who's Making Love is playing on an oldies station somewhere. If Loving You Is Wrong is streaming on someone's playlist. Gimme Some Lovin' is soundtracking a commercial and making money for Steve Winwood. The melodies are alive. The man who created them is gone. And the world does not notice the difference. Y'all, I'm just putting the information out there. Now, Here is where we are. Homer Banks's songs are still generating revenue every single day. Who's Making Love streams on Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube. If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right is on every soul and R&B playlist that has ever been curated. If You're Ready, Come Go With Me still plays on oldies radio stations across the country. Every stream generates a fraction of a cent. Every radio play generates a performance royalty through ASCAP or BMI. Every time one of these songs is licensed for a film or a television show or a commercial, a sync fee is paid. Somebody is collecting. The Stax catalog, the post-1968 recordings, was sold to Fantasy Records in 1977. Concord Music Group acquired Fantasy in 2004. Concord now controls the catalog. The question is, what share of that ongoing revenue reaches Homer Banks's family, his estate, his twin brother James? I'm not making accusations. I'm asking a question that has an answer, and gimme some lovin'. The rock hit, built on the bass riff from Homer Banks's A Lot of Love. The lawsuit was dismissed in 2019. The estate received nothing, not because the riff was different, because the paperwork was wrong. Now, the recognition. Homer Banks is not in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There has been no Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, no posthumous tribute, no documentary, no biopic, no major retrospective, no public monument in Memphis. Let me give you the contrast. Isaac Hayes, who recorded Homer Banks songs, has an Oscar and is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Otis Redding, who recorded at Stax while Homer Banks sold records in the shop next door, is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Staple Singers, who had two major hits written by Homer Banks, were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2022. Steve Winwood, whose most famous early hit shares a bass riff with Homer Banks's recording, is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of Traffic. The man who wrote the songs, the man who built the house, nothing, not a single institutional recognition from the industry he served for 40 years. Right. Now here's the question I want to leave you with. What if Jim Stewart had said yes that day? What if Homer Banks had walked into Stax and instead of being told to work the register, he had been given a microphone with that voice, with the talent that produced a gospel group at 16 and won contests on military bases in Germany, and with the songwriting gift that created hit after hit after hit, who knows what? Homer Banks could have been. He could have been the one standing in the spotlight, the one whose name people remember. The one whose face is on the album cover. Instead, he was the one behind the wall, writing the songs, building the catalog, feeding the machine. And when the machine broke down, nobody came back for the man who kept it running. His twin brother James co-wrote Woman to Woman for Shirley Brown, the last hit Stax ever had before it collapsed. Two brothers, same DNA, both served the same empire, both forgotten when the empire became a museum on Macklemore Avenue. Y'all let me know what you think. Is this what the industry was designed to do? Is this what happens when you build the house, but somebody else puts their name on the door? Now do me this favor. Go find A Lot of Love by Homer Banks right now, the original, 1966. Press play, and then play Gimme Some Lovin' by the Spencer Davis Group right after. And just listen. Listen to what they did. Then go find If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right, the Luther Ingram version. And listen to what Homer Banks gave the world. He was 61 years old. 61 years old. 61 years on this earth. A catalog of songs that defined what Memphis soul sounds like. Melodies that have been sung by some of the greatest voices in the history of popular music. And a name that the world refused to learn. He built the house of Stax, and nobody put his name on the door. Rest in peace to the invisible architect of Memphis soul, Homer Banks.